the larger number that are joining us online. It's great to be back here for an in-person meeting. We've been holding these meetings virtually since the pandemic struck in March 2020. And that's been great because we've been able to welcome people from a wider geography than Aberdeen and Scotland. But it's nonetheless good to be able to have a cup of coffee and a chat before the meeting, and to have another cup of coffee and a chat if you're willing to after the meeting. Those joining us online have to provide their own coffee, I regret to say. The technology doesn't yet allow us to pass coffee down the line. My name is Duncan McNiven, and I graduated first from the university 50 years ago this next month. Which seems no time at all. And I spent a lot of time in here, which used to be King's Library, to good purpose and great enjoyment. I'm chairing the meeting because I chair the university's General Council Business Committee, which acts on behalf of the General Council in between our twice yearly meetings. And I should introduce first the other folk here on the platform. George Boyne perhaps needs little introduction as principal of the university. It's great to have you back, George. You're a great supporter of General Council's work. Tracy Slavin, the Secretary and Chief Operating Officer of the university, is formally the clerk to the General Council, although off-screen is Nicole Cochran, who is the power behind my throne. And we're also joined by Claire Akparanta and Phil Gormley, who will speak under the item of the agenda dealing with the King's Quarter project, item 6 on the agenda, and we look forward to what they're saying. Now, Nicole has provided me with one or two notes, housekeeping notes, which don't include what to do in the event of a fire, but I think we'll probably do sensible things. Nicole is monitoring the folk that are joining us online, and if you need any help online, you're very welcome to put something in the chat, and Nicole or Elise, who's giving her a hand, will pop up and reply to your question. There's space for questions at various times in the agenda, really at the end of almost every item. And I would encourage you, both in person and online, to take part in these question sessions, because this is really an opportunity. This meeting is really an opportunity to draw opinions and views from around the wider scope of the General Council than simply the Business Committee. So I would encourage you to take part. How to take part? Those that are here can do the traditional catching the chairman's eye, although the chairman's eye, I have to say, is slightly blinded by the lights. So you'll maybe need to be more vigorous in attracting my attention than you would normally be. Those that are online can do one of two things. You can put a note in the chat with the text of your question, and Nicole will read it out. Or you can put your hand up virtually, and when the time comes to ask your question, Nicole will unmute you, and you can ask it using your own mic, and if you're willing, your own camera. The meeting is being recorded, so people can watch it online afterwards. But if those of you that are here fall asleep, you can catch up with it online afterwards. And those online at the moment can, if there's any interruption in the connection, can watch it afterwards. And of course, we'll welcome a number of other people. One of my contemporaries at university isn't able to be here virtually at this moment, and she's going to watch it online afterwards. Now, I think that is all the housekeeping items that I need to do. The first proper item on the agenda is the minutes of the 315th meeting, which was held on the 13th of January entirely virtually, of course. Does anyone, will have an opportunity under any other competent business, under item 7, to raise any point that people want to make arising from the minutes, but as to the accuracy of the minutes, are people content? If not content, you could give me a vigorous wave. And if you're online and not content, you could put a wee note in the chat for Nicole to read out. Somebody has a comment. Somebody has a comment? No? Okay. When you speak from the floor, incidentally, remember to do what I didn't do at the beginning of the meeting and press the button that says speak. Okay, the next item is George Boyne updating us on what's happening around the university. As I said at the beginning, George, in his time as principal, has been very supportive of what the General Council's up to. At the Business Committee, we have frequent updates from George, which are always very illuminating, and I hope that he'll share that. I'm confident that he'll share that illumination with us all this morning.
Thank you, Duncan, and a very warm Aberdonian welcome to all of you, those in the room and those attending online. As Duncan has said, I'm going to update on the circumstances that the university finds itself in, or academic performance, or financial performance, or student numbers. And I'm going to begin by reminding you of our Aberdeen 2040 strategy, which of course draws upon the 1495 foundational purpose of being open to all and dedicated to the pursuit of truth in the service of others. So first of all, a reminder of the main components of Aberdeen 2040, which we launched on Founders Day in 2020, just before the pandemic struck. It has continued to serve us throughout the pandemic and will do so for the next 18 years. We now have only 18 years left to achieve the objectives that we set ourselves in 2020. So these, as you'll recall, are to be inclusive, reflecting the foundational purpose of being open to all, interdisciplinary, so the pursuit of truth, not only disciplinary truth, but the truth that we find by combining our academic disciplines, to be in the service of others internationally, as well as regionally and locally. And then we have a topic which William Elphinston did not foresee in 1495, and that's the need for us to be sustainable in everything we do, in our education and research, for the university itself to be sustainable, and for our impact on the wider world to contribute to the sustainability of the planet. In addition to these 4 themes, the Aberdeen 2040 strategy has 5 topics, mainly research topics, but also educational. And these are illustrated on the next slide. I won't read out the names of the 5 themes, but I'm going to emphasize that these are very closely connected to each other. Other universities are focused on some or even all of these 5 themes. I think what's distinctive about the University of Aberdeen strategy is the close connection between them and our joint investment in them. So for example, if we take the one at the very top, energy transition, which of course is the signature topic not only for the University of Aberdeen, but for the Northeast economy for decades to come, energy transition will be partly driven not only by new technology, but also by developments in data and artificial intelligence. And energy transition will have an impact on the environment and our biodiversity. It will have an impact on the health, nutrition and well-being of the population here and further afield, and will also have an impact on social inclusion. And you may be aware that the Scottish Government has set aside £500 million solely for the northeast of Scotland to ensure that we have a just transition. So I'm illustrating here that the 5 are very closely connected to each other, and we have appointed 5 directors, 1 for each of these topics, who are already working very closely as a team and are approaching these practical problems that we are helping to solve in exactly that spirit, that it requires cooperation and collaboration across the five in order for us to have maximum impact. So I'm coming next to the highlights in the last 12 months or so, and I'll just go through those one by one. First, we had our second Queen's Anniversary Prize in only 4 years. This one for soil science. I was very pleased to accompany Graham Payton, our head of School of Soil Science, to St James's Palace to receive the award, which was a great honour for us and for the university. And only 4 years previously, we had received the Queen's Anniversary Prize for our work on health service research. So we're absolutely delighted to get 2 of these, the highest accolade for a UK university in only 4 years. Next on the list is our super result in the National Student Survey for overall student satisfaction. This is our best ever result in a survey which has been running for a long time now. And I'm delighted because it shows our students recognised the many efforts that academic and professional service staff had made to keep their education moving forward, but also to support them in their personal lives. You'll recall that we delivered many food parcels to our halls in Hill Head, provided constant support to our students through communication, including phone calls, to check that they were okay during the difficult days of the pandemic, which are mostly behind us now. And we're planning a normal academic experience for our students in the next academic year in the autumn, providing an in-person, on-campus experience, which is what they've been asking for all the way through. Next, I come to our rankings in the UK league tables and our UK ranking in some of the international league tables, and you'll see that these are mostly favourable. In the 20s, there's a 5th ranking, the Complete University Guide, which is coming out next week. We're not exactly sure where we'll end up in that yet, but regardless of what our ranking is on that one, we are approximately 10 places higher on average than we were in 2018. So we're making really good progress with our reputation and our ranking. Of course, there's always more work to be done, and these league tables can be unstable from one year to the next. So we can't be entirely confident that these rankings will be maintained in any single table, but our aspiration is to be consistently top 25 across all 5 of the league tables that we pay attention to. And then I mentioned Aberdeen 2040 earlier. Our university community spent a whole year developing the components of Aberdeen 2040. And I'm pleased to say all of that effort was recognised in Aberdeen 2040 being named University Strategy of the Year by the Higher Education Planners Association. So a really good recognition for the efforts that everyone had made to develop the strategy. So we're making good progress, but nevertheless we have a lot of challenges in front of us, and I've listed just a few of these and a few of the priorities that we have. The priorities are at the top, the challenges are at the top of the list. Of course, for every organisation in the world, there is political and economic uncertainty as a result of Putin's war on Ukraine, which seems likely to rumble on for a tragically long time. So that has introduced some uncertainty for the whole of the higher education sector. In addition, like every other organisation, we're facing very high inflation, and we don't know how long that will continue for. Currently 9%, looking like it will head into double figures quite soon. That's put pressure on our own energy costs, on our staffing costs. We also have other cost rises from national insurance and pensions and so on. So it is quite a challenging financial climate. Combined with that, we have a flat cash budget settlement for the Scottish Funding Council. Scottish Funding Council provides 30% of our total funding, so that's a difficulty for us. Flat cash in the context of rising inflation, of course, means real terms cuts in the years ahead, perhaps as high as 20% over a 5-year period, depending on the inflation rate. So we'll need to work even harder to generate our own funding in the context of a very tight fiscal climate for the public sector and for the government in Scotland. But we have plenty of opportunities as well, including international student recruitment, which has grown enormously in the last few years at Aberdeen, where we have 150% more international students this year than we had in 2018. We're rebuilding our research capacity by investing some of the revenue that we've acquired from international student recruitment. Our research capacity fell by 25% between 2013 and 2018. In 2013, we had 800 teaching and research staff, those eligible for the REF exercise, which you may have seen recently, and that fell to 600 by 2018. We've put back 100 of the posts that we've lost so far, and we'll work very hard to replace the other 100 in the next few years. We have regional and global partnerships, including a partnership with Curtin University in Perth, Australia. We're in discussions with Calgary University in Canada to add to that partnership. Crucially for us, those are both world energy cities, and they have similar priorities and similar interests to Aberdeen, so those could be very strong collaborations. On the regional side, we've just contributed to the bid for the Green Freeport, and you may have seen a number of bids have gone in across Scotland in the last few days. We contributed the innovation strand to the North East bid. We're keeping our fingers crossed that will be successful. We're continuing to recruit extra academic and professional service posts. You'll see shortly an advert for 20 research fellows for the interdisciplinary challenges. And of course, we continue to invest in a physical and digital estate. You'll be hearing more about that from my colleagues quite soon. But on the next slide, we have one of those investments completed recently, our magnificent science teaching hub on St Macher Drive. If you haven't seen it already, I believe it is now open to the public. So please go along and have a look around it. I'm sure you'll be very impressed. Next, I'm coming to our changing student population, which I'd mentioned has grown significantly, not only in the international students, but also our online activity has quadrupled in the last 4 years. These are programs which are delivered only online. They're not the programs that were delivered partly online during the pandemic. They are specifically tailored for the online market, and also our TNE, transnational education, has been growing significantly in Qatar and in China. I'll be taking questions about all of this quite soon. I'm almost at the end. Next, I'm coming to our revenue growth, driven largely by our international student recruitment activity. You'll see that was interrupted in the worst of the pandemic years and increased only a couple of million, but we're back on track and our revenue is up 20 million this year. And we're projecting growth of at least that level next year, which is just as well given the inflationary context that we're facing. We've also had surpluses for each of the last 4 years to invest in staff, in digital and in physical, moving away quickly and strongly from the years of deficit that the new team inherited in 2018. So this is a very positive picture. It would be even more positive were it not for the likelihood of 10% inflation, but it will still give us sufficient revenue, not only to cover our rising costs, but also to invest. One final point about our revenue, this is the distribution between education, research, and other, which is mostly commercial revenue. You'll see the educational percentage rising quickly as a result of our international student recruitment successes. I would now like to see our research and our commercial revenue rise at the same rate. And now that we're out of the pandemic, I'm pleased to say our research income has risen by 10% this year. The commercial income is not yet rising, but we're setting similar targets for that commercial income in the years ahead. Now, the money in itself does not matter. The whole purpose of generating the revenue is to continue to serve our foundational purpose of being open to all and dedicated to the pursuit of truth in the service of others, regionally, internationally, through our education and research. That's the purpose of generating the money. We're not a business. We're not a government. We're a university, and therefore we seek to have an impact on the world through our education and research. I'm happy to take questions.
Good. Questions to George. Those that are online can be putting up their hands or typing in the chat for Nicole to moderate. Those that are here, can I invite questions just now? Remember to put out on your mic when I call you. Is that Mel Roberts wanting to ask a question? There's a button called speak, yeah.
I'm not awfully good at this. Listening to you, I was just thinking to myself, you've painted a really strong picture of, I suppose, essentially survival, but survive and thrive in there as well. So would you consider there have been positives because of the pandemic, and what they are, and which of those, if there are, and I'm sure there are, you would consider would be, I don't know, sort of launch pad for the future in some way that would continue into the future?
So I think I would pick out three. We work very successfully as a university community, and I think that's helped us to bond and reinforce the common purpose that we have and the support that we've given each other. And I think that's strengthened the culture, not just in this university, but in others as well. So I see that as something very positive. Secondly, of course, we developed our digital education. And so now we're in a better position to complement the in-person, on-campus experience that our students have been asking for with a better digital component. And we've set aside in the budget for the next few years £21 million to make further investments in digital technology to make sure that that continues to be strong. And then thirdly, on the education side, perhaps I'll go to four. Thirdly, on the education side, we've altered our forms of assessment. So we've been relying less on conventional pen and paper exams. And we'll go back to that to some extent, but I think we'll have a more productive mix of different forms of assessment, which will draw out the talents of all our students. Because what we saw during the pandemic was that students from less privileged backgrounds were able to cope better with the types of assessment that we adjusted to, and I think we need to keep that in mind as we progress. And then finally, I think I said I'd go with two, and I'm going to end up with four. Our research connections have been strengthened because we're no longer at a geographical disadvantage of needing to travel further perhaps than other Scottish universities in order to attend meetings. Everyone was in the same situation, facing the same constraint of travel not being available, and therefore everyone was joining in online on an equal footing. So I think that was also good, and I expect, partly because of our commitment to sustainability, that we'll continue to operate more in that way, not giving up travel entirely, because there are human connections that are best taken forward face-to-face, and that will be true for our researchers, but some of the work will continue to take place online. So yes, survive and thrive. Thank you for putting it that way.
Judith Roberts.
Thank you. Principal, just looking at the other side of that particular coin, to what extent has the COVID pandemic impacted progress on the commitments within the 2040 strategic plan? Has there had to be any recasting of timescales, for example?
Yes, there were some things that we slowed down in order to cope with the greater workload imposed by the pandemic. And we'll take a revised set of priorities and plans to the University Court in the autumn, taking account of the fact that we were slowed by COVID, but we remain determined to meet the commitments that we've set ourselves. We have targets for 2025, which remain valid, and then the longer term targets, I'm sure we'll catch up the time that we lost.
Now, can I check with Nicole whether there's anyone wants to contribute online? Nicole.
Yes, I've got a question and a comment. So the first question is, well, first of all, it says an excellent presentation. Thanks, George. Past strategies have identified collaborations with other northern universities of the world as a unique contribution Aberdeen can make to the world academic community. Can this still be considered an aim of the university?
Absolutely. I did mention briefly regional and global partnerships in the presentation. For us to be academically outstanding, we can't expect just to work on our own. That's why the global collaborations are so important. We need to connect to the best research groups who are working on the same topics as we are, elsewhere in the world, wherever they are. So global academic collaboration is absolutely crucial to us. At a strategic level, Curtin, Calgary, but each of our research groups has connections to their peers elsewhere, partly, as I've just been saying, through face-to-face human interaction, attendance at conferences and so on, but also connecting virtually in the way that we are partly today with the questioner.
Is there a kind of northern universities angle to that? You know, neither Curtin nor Qatar is really northern.
I wouldn't say there's a particular northern angle to this. We want to collaborate with the best wherever they are. So we don't feel constrained to be northern only, as it were. Of course, we'll collaborate with successful northern universities, but also in the global south, the US, wherever. We're completely open-minded about the collaborations.
Thank you. Another question, Nicole?
This is more of a comment. It's from Ian. He says, not a question, but having been round the new science teaching hub, I would encourage General Council members to visit. It is such an impressive facility, will help attract students and underpins our 2040 strategy. After seeing it, you just feel even better about the university.
Well, that's interesting, and we might come back to that comment when we think about the next meeting, because the poor people that run the Science Hub are in complete ignorance of this. But I have ambitions to have a collective visit to the hub at some stage. Other questions from the floor, and for those in person? There's nobody waving vigorously enough to attract my attention. Yes, the gentleman at the back. Thank you.
Hello, thank you, George, for that excellent presentation. You mentioned quite frequently our research capacity and how it had declined in recent years and how you intend to rebuild it. I wonder if you could make some comments about the recent RAF results for the university, and if you have time or if people are interested, I'd be very interested to see what comments you might make about the business school's performance in the recent REF. Thank you.
So our REF performance was unsurprisingly disappointing. Any university that cut its research capacity by 25% would have had a similar result. But during the period 2013 to 2018, the University of Aberdeen was unique. Other research-intensive universities in the sector were growing their research capacity by 43% at the same time as we were cutting ours by 25%. Now, this is something that happened before I arrived, so I think it's understandable that I feel slightly annoyed about it and disappointed that it happened. It was a misstep, I think. There was pressure at the time to save money, and therefore posts were lost. But that saving has now resulted in a very significant loss to us for the next 7 years of money from the current REF. So we'll need to work hard, as I said, to replace that funds in other ways through research grants and from international student recruitment. Let me come to the business school. It was the first time the business school had submitted a full range submission. So over 60 people were submitted this time round, and they were roughly halfway on the league table. Despite having lived through this catastrophic reduction in research capacity in the university, and despite it being their first submission, I thought coming roughly halfway was pretty good, and they were above halfway for the quality of their publications. They were almost in the top third for the quality of the publication, so I thought that was a pretty good result and gives me confidence that with the right investment and the right support and consistency of investment and support and a focus on quality, they'll do better next time.
Okay, thanks, George. And that underlines the importance of the remarks you made at the end of your presentation about the vital importance of getting the financial end of the university's work in place. It funds important work. Other questions within the conference centre? I see none. Any online? Nicole?
There's two more. So we've got Abdullah's asking, how has the student demand been for programmes in the humanities, and does the university expect to cut some programmes?
I'm pleased to say that demand for our humanities programmes remains strong. And as long as that demand continues to be strong, there is no intention whatsoever to cut our humanities programmes.
So I believe this person wants to come onto their camera and microphone. So just to say, Mark, I'm making you a presenter now. You'll see you'll get camera and microphone. Camera and microphone options pop up on your screen. You will have to turn those on before you can speak.
Thank you, Nicole. I mean, before I ask my question, I just wanted to say, as a member of the Business Committee, that I'm really proud of the situation the university is in. I want to thank George and the university staff for leaving us a situation where we can potentially cope with what inflation is likely to bring to us. I think many universities will be highly envious of this position. So my question relates to the REF. And just on this note, I mean, forgiving what's already been said, as an old student of Divinity and Religious Studies at the university, I'm incredibly proud of the work of Professor John Swinton and his research on dementia and theology. So I'm just wondering, where we do have successes in the REF, how does the university celebrate that? Thank you. That's my question.
So we celebrate primarily by investing in success, which is exactly what we've been doing in Divinity, and we've just released another post to that group because they did so well in the REF. So we celebrate by continuing to protect that strength. It's really important that we invest in our success, and Divinity's result in the REF was spectacular. They are the best research group in the UK, according to the REF result, which is absolutely fantastic for them and for the university as a whole. It's super to be able to say we came first.
Thank you very much, George. Now, time is marching on, and it may be that we're bypassing a question online, but I think it's important that we finish up on time as well as starting on time. So the next item on the agenda is my Business Committee report, but many thanks, George, for your usual excellent and rapid view of the work of the university. I'm proud to be an alumnus, and I think that opinion is shared by everyone here, and I'm sure everyone online. My report, the Business Committee has had 2 meetings since the last General Council meeting. That's the cycle. We meet in principle quarterly. We met on the 3rd of March and the 9th of June. And we've kept in touch with the general state of the university, partly through George's presentations, partly through Tracy's. Especially what the university has been doing in the face of COVID, and it's great to hear the gradual return to normality, and Georgie's hope that will be finalised with the new session. We welcome the emergence from the pandemic and the continued achievements that the university makes, especially in student recruitment, and the 5th place in the National Student Survey that George highlighted is a very important achievement in that regard, because that's watched, understandably, by students all over the world, including in Scotland. We've heard also about the university's action on Ukraine, on the war in Ukraine, supporting those in Aberdeen affected, and prospectively supporting research partnerships involving Ukraine academics. At our meeting the day before yesterday, we heard from Marion Campbell, who's the Vice Principal for Research, about the results of the Research Excellence Framework, which George has briefly recounted. There are 1 or 2 things which Marion spoke about, which I wanted to highlight, which George hasn't mentioned. The first is that the proportion of the research that was entered into the Research Excellence Framework, which was of world-leading or internationally excellent standard, rose from 76% to 79%, which seems to me to be a very high proportion. The problem was that other universities, for the reasons that George has articulated, advanced by a greater degree than that. George has highlighted, or with Mark Lindley Highfield's help, has highlighted the theology department's performance being the first in the UK. But it's interesting that public health, part of the university which is of particular importance and which has had particular attention in the last little while, was the first in Scotland and the 8th in the UK in Research Excellence Framework rankings. So we heard from Marion also the energetic plan which is already in hand to improve the performance in the REF next time round, including the increase in the number of research posts which George briefly alluded to. At our previous meeting on the 3rd of March, we heard from Pete Edwards, who's the recently appointed Vice Principal responsible for regional engagement and recovery, an angle to the university's work which the Business Committee warmly welcomed. And we provided comments to Pete and ideas on how the university, in partnership with others around the North East, might support the regional economy and the regional culture. It was a stimulating presentation, and we will get Pete back again once he's had a chance to do more work on his new responsibilities. We've seen improvements, and thanks go to Tracy for this, in the university's link, in the Business Committee links with the University Court, which were slightly destabilised by changes in the Constitution in 2017. We now have a new rector, and I welcome the fact that Martini Aziki has attended both of the Business Committee meetings since she was appointed in January. And the link with Court is also strengthened by the recent nomination by Court and appointment by the Business Committee of 3 Court members who become members of the Business Committee. One of them has been a member of the Business Committee for some years, Ian Percival, who was originally elected as a General Counsel Assessor to Court, an arrangement which was terminated by the 2017 changes, but Ian provides important continuity in that link with the Court, and we now have 2 other alumni of the university who are members of the Business Committee, having been appointed as independent members of the Court. Robert Trainham, who hails from the United States, and Otto Torresson. One of the preoccupations of the Business Committee over the past little while has been the future of that part of Marischal College which is not in the hands now of the City Council, the part beyond the far end of the quad at Marischal. That includes the Mitchell Hall, in which many of us, including I, graduated in the past. There's a very substantial estate there, which is in perfectly wind and watertight condition, but which needs a new use and which has potential to be used more fruitfully for the university and in particular for the city and region. Jenny Mordew and Eric Crockard from the Business Committee, and Mel Roberts, who was formerly vice convener of the Business Committee, have represented the committee on a working party which was chaired by the university's Director of Development and which reported to the senior management team recently, a report which took on board many of the very interesting ideas which the Business Committee had put together. That report outlines an opportunity which is not easily realised, and it's not easily realised for financial reasons. It's a substantial estate which needs a lot of work done to it, but which can be regarded as a long-term project. What is needed is a long-term financially sustainable use for the property, and the business committee's comments, ideas for the use of the property focused on that among other angles. We'll keep an eye on this topic. We've been reporting over the past few meetings of the Business Committee on the writing of a history of the Business Committee from 1960, which was the history of the General Council from 1960, which was the end date of a previous volume written by Louise Donald for the quincentenary of the university. It's now, the text is now complete. Dr. Charles Calder, a retired academic from the university, has put together what I find a fascinating account, many things that I didn't know about the university, including that Nan Shepherd, now renowned for her writing on wilderness, especially in the Cairngorms, Nan Shepherd was a member of the Business Committee in the past. There's a lot of fascinating material there. My predecessor as convener of the Business Committee, Nigel Lindsay, and I are working to review the work that Charles has done, and I'm confident that publication in some form, at least online, and I would hope also on paper, will be possible in the near future. It's a fascinating piece of work, and we owe Charles, who's been doing this work entirely for love, not money, we owe Charles a debt of gratitude. The agenda of the Business Committee is chosen by the committee itself and can reflect the concerns of alumni, whether they're in this room or whether they're online. We're having a thinking day to refresh our agenda, probably in early October. We did that in 2018 very fruitfully, and we want to repeat that now post-pandemic. So if there's any ideas in the hall, do speak to me afterwards, or online, you could email Nicole, and if Nicole hasn't already done it, she'll give you she'll put on the chat a suitable email address to do that. It's been a stimulating time convening the Business Committee. I've enjoyed it, as you will perhaps have noticed, a great deal. Part of the joy of that is working with the senior staff of the university, and I want to thank particularly Tracy and also George and the colleagues, their colleagues that I've mentioned en passant, for their unstinting support for the General Council and the subjects that we have chosen, that the General Council has chosen to investigate. Nicole has done a wonderful job keeping me in order and providing ideas and making things happen. And a lot of thanks are due to her as well. And thanks to the Business Committee members, a few of whom are here. I see a number of others online, including Mark Lindley-Hatfield, who spoke. The Business Committee depends on the time and imagination of its members, and these have been given in full measure. So thank you very much. And I would encourage those present and those online to put their hat in the ring for election to the Business Committee, which Tracy's going to speak about in a moment. The Business Committee operates in a very informal way. There's no pettiness. There's no kind of exclusiveness about the Business Committee. We've now had 2 Chinese members for a number of meetings. They have contributed very helpfully. I look forward to Robert Trainham from Washington, DC, doing the same. The point is that our meetings will continue to be hybrid as this meeting is, and that has been working well, including the day before yesterday. Geography is now no barrier to membership of the business committee. Now, that's my report. I'm very happy to take questions or comments. The gentleman in the third front row.
Like you, Duncan, I graduated from Mitchell Hall quite a considerable number of years ago, and more recently have been disappointed to learn that the university has chosen the P&G Live for our graduations. Our family feel the same, and I've spoken to other people who also feel the same. My grandson, who graduated virtually in law 2 years ago, got the opportunity, as it were, retrospectively to graduate in person, but he's turned it down because he doesn't feel that the venue is appropriate for a university of over 500 years standing. And I wondered if there's any possibility of reshaping the graduation ceremonies, even having more sessions, so that the numbers are not huge in one particular session, so that people who wish to maintain the tradition of graduating on either the King's College campus, if not back in the Mitchell Hall, if that would be a possibility that the university might consider.
That's something that the business committee has spoken about quite a number of times, partly in the context of Marshall because of the Mitchell Hall, but partly because members of the business committee are invited to graduations, and we do our best to take up that invitation because I think it's an important way of supporting the new graduates, showing that we past graduates care. The university faces a dilemma because understandably graduates want to bring their families, and that creates a large gathering, a gathering which is a little large for the Elphinstone Hall, which of course has been used for graduations until relatively recently. I went along to the graduation ceremony, two of the graduation ceremonies, I think, in the conference centre out at Dice, and I was actually favourably impressed with what the university had managed to achieve in what was a modern barn of a building. I felt, and the graduates that I spoke to after the ceremony, I think also felt that there was a sense of occasion. It wasn't perhaps the same sense of occasion, but there was a sufficient sense of occasion to make them glad that they graduated in person. But perhaps I could call on Tracy to add more knowledgeable views than just my personal views.
Thank you, and absolutely appreciate that sense of disappointment that is there for, I think, particularly families who have previously graduated from the old Aberdeen campus, but we are in a position where Elphinstone was no longer capable of holding, even with increases in the number of ceremonies. We would be talking about a 3-week period to try and manage through graduations in Elphinstone, which simply wasn't something that was practical for us to do. Also very conscious that we're going to have a presentation about the proposals for the King's Quarters project, which would have also made access to that particular part of the campus extremely difficult from next year. So what we did was to look at the options and to explore using TECA for the winter graduations. It did work really well. It's a facility which has flexibility, it has accessibility, particularly for international students and their families coming back to Aberdeen. And the important thing, I think, for the university is to make sure we're respecting and celebrating our students, our graduates, as they're going through the process. And for the time being, the TECA is the best option that we have available. We did look at alternatives in terms of using marquees. But as we'll have seen with the weather yesterday, tea time, if we, it can be a little bit uncertain in Aberdeen during the, might be polite, during this point in the year, and there was a real risk that we would have both ceremonies which were inaudible if they were in the middle of a particular bad patch in weather, but also that we would be in a mud flat if we had more than a day of particularly bad weather. So as it stands at the moment, TECA is our best option, but obviously we'll continue to consider what we can do as we go forward.
And the Business Committee will continue to keep an eye on that aspect. Now, Nicole, I've got an eye to the time, but Nicole has one contribution from a question from the ether.
Yes, I just also wanted to share those couple of comments, one from Martina, our rector, and from Mark, just saying that they share the sentiments that have been discussed today about on-campus graduations. So Nigel's also asking, good to hear about plans for the Mitchell Hall Picture Gallery and the east end of Marshall College. Obviously, finance is a major issue before the build can be restored to full use, but meantime, is there an adequate fire suppression system in the building?
It may be that Paul Gormley knows the answer to that. I do not.
I don't believe there's a fire suppression system, but there are suitable systems in place from a fire safety point of view in terms of fire alarms and means of escape for its particular use at the minute.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we should move on, and as I gave a trailer for, the next item is Tracy, as in her formal position as clerk, talking about the next elections to the Business Committee.
Thank you. As required by Standing Order 19, notice is hereby given that the current terms of members of the Business Committee will end on the 30th of September 2022. That's in relation to 3 members of the Business Committee. The following individuals are due to retire from the Business Committee on that date, but are eligible for re-election. The names of those members are Jenny Mordew, Dan Montgomery and Graham Nichol. Nominations for the positions on the committee will close on Friday the 5th of August at 12 noon. So we do have a period, but I would encourage nominations to come forward quickly. If more nominations are received than there are vacancies, then an election will be held and the council will be notified accordingly. Nomination forms are available for collection today, or by contacting Nicole Cochran in the Alumni Relations team. For those attending virtually, please use the email address which is being posted in the meeting chat to request a nomination form. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tracy, and many thanks to the 3 members who are retiring for their contribution over the past period of their office. It may be subject to the wishes of the General Council that we see them back in the Business Committee re-elected, and I do hope they are. But I encourage others to put their hats in the ring as well. Now, we turn to Paul Gormley and to Claire Akbaranta as the next item on the agenda. We felt that it was useful to spotlight the King's Quarter project, partly because it's important to the future of the university, and partly to encourage in-person attendance at this meeting, because we will have the opportunity to see the site after the meeting. The floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Claire Akbaranta. I'm a project manager within the Estates and Facilities Directorate. I'm also the project manager in the King's Quarter project, which is one of 2 major capital projects on the Old Aberdeen University grounds, scheduled for delivery in 2025. I'm going to start by giving the background to the project, and I'll take you through the proposals before going over the key benefits and the challenges that the project will bring, and opening the floor to any questions that you may have. There will be a tour on offer at the end of the meeting of the buildings in scope, and I would encourage you all to attend, as I'll give you an appreciation for the scale of the project and also allow you to better appreciate the proposals. So to start at the very beginning, the project was initiated in January 2019 when University Court approved proposals put forward to significantly improve the capacity and the quality of teaching and learning space on the King's College campus. The key objectives set were to improve the student experience to help facilitate planned growth in the student population, notably at postgraduate level, and particularly the international student cohort, and also to markedly enhance and repurpose buildings in the key parts of campus, particularly the historic core. So the King's Quarter project came to light in response to these objectives. In September last year, following a pause due to the pandemic, the King's Quarter project was progressed with a high-level remit to deliver transformational teaching and learning spaces in Old Aberdeen, providing a modern, adaptable, interdisciplinary, high-quality teaching environment suitable for multiple skills to use in the delivery of both undergraduate and postgraduate taught teaching. The project must lead to enhanced teaching capacity to support objectives for growth while revitalising historic buildings at the heart of King's campus. Specifically, this overarching aim must be delivered through the innovative modernisation of the Cromwell Tower, the Book Stack and the Old Senate Wing. In the initial stages of the project, there was a feasibility study undertaken which identified the extents of the project. The areas highlighted in yellow on the slide are the areas within the project scope. So we have the Cromwell Tower, which dates 1661 and will be renovated internally to provide world-class teaching spaces. We also have the Book Stack and the Old Senate Wing, which will also be renovated to provide quality teaching and learning space. We have the Northern Courtyard, which will be covered over to provide a new learning hall, which will interconnect the buildings surrounding it and also provide additional teaching, learning, social interaction and event space. We also have the King's College Garden to the south, where a new memorial garden is proposed. In order to progress the proposals, there will be an element of demolition required, and these areas are highlighted in red on the slide. So the 1954 extension to the Book Stack will be removed to reveal the 1921 facade behind, and will also open up views internally to the Cromwell Tower, which is the oldest building within this scope of buildings. The extension to the James Mackay Hall kitchen will also be removed and replaced with a new circulation core, which will give access to the upper floor of the learning hall, the second floor of Cromwell Tower, and also through into James Mackay Hall. The development will have two main entrances, one to the east and one to the west. Currently, when you approach the building from King Street along Regent Walk, you're faced with the rear facade of Elphinstone Hall and the Old Senate Wing, which isn't very welcoming. We propose to create a new pergola, which will signal the entrance and welcome users into the development. To the west, we'll have a new courtyard entrance between Cromwell Tower and the Linklater Rooms, which will provide access from the High Street side of the campus. So as you enter the building, you come through a wind lobby into a new reception area, which leads straight through into the double height learning hall. The learning hall provides social breakout and learning space, and will have a peripheral circulation route which deals with the variance in levels between the surrounding buildings and allows for connections to be made. There'll be a new link through to the Linklater Rooms, which will allow the rooms to be used in conjunction with the learning hall, and also a new link into the Elphinstone Hall kitchen, which will allow the spaces to be catered for should there be a need for an evening dinner or a reception. To the sides of the learning hall, there'll be two new partially glazed teaching spaces, and within the Book Stack, we'll have a larger teaching space. As you make your way through into the new circulation core, you'll have access through into James Mackay Hall, and also through into the ground floor of Cromwell Tower. In the ground floor of Cromwell Tower, we're going to have a new remote control room, which will be linked to the observatory on the top floor. So currently the observatory is not accessible and it's not open to all. So this new room will allow activities undertaken within the observatory to be viewed by everybody and also allow opportunity for public engagement. So this is an image of the learning hall from the ground floor, looking towards the Book Stack. And this is an image of the same space, but set up for a seminar. The image on your left shows the connection through to the Linklater Rooms, and you can see beyond the western entrance. The image on the right is of the circulation core and shows you the connection through to the Cromwell Tower. So as you come up the circulation core, you've got access through into the first floor of James Mackay Hall and also through to the first floor of the Cromwell Tower, where you're going to find a renovated teaching space. As you make your way through to the upper level of the learning hall, you're going to find social learning space, which overlooks the ground floor below. Again, similar to the floor below, we're going to have two new partially glazed teaching spaces to the south and a large teaching space within the big stack. You're also going to have direct access through into the Old Senate wing, where you'll find 3 further additional teaching spaces. And this is an image from the upper level of the learning hall, looking down to the floor below, and you can see the main entrance beyond in the Senate wing. And this is an image of a teaching space within the big stack with the learning hall beyond. And again, this is a teaching space within the Old Senate wing, which overlooks the playing fields on the left and has a connection through to the learning hall on the right. You can come up either through the northern or the southern staircase within the Old Senate wing, where you'll find additional 2 new teaching spaces and a new quiet study area where students can choose to study in silence. You can also come up another level within the circulation core to give access to the second floor of Cromwell Tower, where we'll have a further renovated teaching space. In order to access the third floor of Cromwell Tower, you can either come up through the existing staircase or through the new accessibility lift, and there'll be additional 2 renovated teaching spaces available for use. And this is an image of one of the renovated teaching spaces within Cromwell Tower. On the very top floor, we have the observatory, which is going to be made good and watertight. And again, we do have the link to the ground floor remote control room for those who cannot access it. And this is a proposed new memorial garden in King's College Garden, which is behind 52 College Bounds. The footprint of the garden matches that of the Odell Garden, and there's going to be a mix of hard and soft landscaping. There's going to be bench seating and trees planted at a ratio of 2 to 1 to replace the loss of the trees within the Odell Garden. And there's also going to be a new bike store. This is an artist's impression of what the garden might look like. And this is an image from the High Street towards Elphinstone Hall. And you can see outlined, highlighted by the yellow line, the outline of the learning hall roof behind. So you can appreciate that the design is discreet and is sympathetic to the environment. However, internally, it will be significantly enhanced. So to go over some of the key benefits that the project will bring, it will provide 3,420 metres squared of new teaching, learning and social space. It will also provide over 500 metres squared of enhanced teaching space. It will improve accessibility and breathe life back into the underused building within the heart of the Old Aberdeen campus. It will transform and future-proof the buildings in use, in scope, and it will also be sympathetic to the environment. It will provide a teaching environment which supports diversified approaches to pedagogy. It will enhance the student experience and reputation, and in turn, our ability to attract and retain staff and students. Now, as with all projects, it doesn't come with its challenges, which we need to overcome. As you'll be aware, we are in a turbulent market at the moment. And this is largely due to geopolitical issues out with our control, such as the impact of the global pandemic, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, and also nationally, the after effects of Brexit. Locally, we're seeing a construction boom, so there's a high demand for contractors and suppliers. So we are engaging regularly with consultants and contractors just to ensure that we have a strong understanding of the market. We're also mindful that we're dealing with historic buildings, and there is a risk that we may unearth issues during the construction phase, which we're previously unaware of. In order to mitigate the risk, we have undertaken various site surveys just to reduce the risk of unexpected findings. In terms of timescales, so obtained planning permission in June last year, and we recently completed the develop design stage last month. So we're progressing through the technical design stage, and we're looking to start the procurement process for the main construction contractor in October this year. We're looking to commence construction next summer, and we're targeting a building opening date of the start of the academic year in 2025. So that brings the overview of the King's Quarter project to a close. So I'd like to thank you all for listening. Just to remind you, there is a tour of the buildings in scope on offer following the meeting. So if it's of interest to you, please just meet me at the main entrance to the reception and follow the meeting. Paul and I would like to invite any questions that you may have. And similarly, if anything comes to mind, then I'm really happy to discuss further when we go around the buildings later on. Thank you.
Is there anyone in the room that wants to ask a question after that absolutely fascinating and beautifully illustrated presentation? It's probably more difficult for people to ask questions online. Are there any, Nicole?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, there's time enough if you want. We can come back to it if anyone has a burning question to raise. Are there any questions? People in the hall have the chance to ask Claire questions as we go round the tour, I suggest. Okay. The next item, number 7, and with many thanks to Claire for that presentation, the next item is any other competent business, and one medical alumnus has emailed in with a question which actually links to one of the things that Claire was saying in her presentation. Focused on the need to save our planet. And what I propose to do is summarize the point that the alumnus has raised and invite any comments from within the hall or online, if there are any. The alumnus is not able to be present himself to do that. But what he says is, every person educated and enriched by the University of Aberdeen only matters if there is a planet to live on. And he seeks a public pledge to be climate friendly and strive to be climate positive. He suggests that for every graduate should plant 10 trees. So we've seen a picture of Claire's 10 trees, and create a considered, robust, self-sustaining, oxygen and life-supporting environment. And more at the organisational level, he's suggesting that each and every discipline should compete to out-achieve the others, and that progress should be reviewed annually, which links to some of the things that George was saying about Aberdeen 2040 earlier in the meeting. I think we all have a strong affinity with what that medical alumnus, who incidentally works works on telemedicine in general practice. So in his professional life, he's practicing what he preaches. I think we all probably have a fellow feeling with his sentiments. Are there any particular comments within the room? Or online, Nicole? Is there anything that you want to add, George, to what you said earlier about sustainability in the light of what the gentleman says?
I should just say that we have 4 specific commitments within Aberdeen 2040, 4 of the 20 which are specifically devoted to environmental sustainability. We're deeply aware of our responsibilities to address this challenge, and we'd be more than happy to hear further advice about how we should best do that from the person who's asking the question or anyone else. But it's right at the top of our agenda, and we discuss this frequently in Senate, at court, on the senior management team. It's a constant topic of attention for us.
Thanks, George. Is there anything that you, Claire, want to add to the kind of sustainability angle of the what attention you've given to the environmental footprint of the work that you've described, Claire?
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, one of the key benefits of the project is that we're reusing the existing building stock, so we're not having to go and build on new greenfield sites elsewhere. The university do target a BREEAM excellent rating for our new builds and very good for refurbishment. So that's a target that we are aiming to meet on the King's Quarter project. We do undertake a carbon and an energy assessment at each stage of the project. We've recently completed the stage 3 assessment, and it identifies areas where improvements can be made. So for example, one area that we looked at is the use of recycled aggregate within the concrete mix. We're also looking to connect into the local district heating network, which offers a shared heating source, which reduces any heat loss across the campus.
Okay, thank you very much, Claire. I'm sorry not to have given you advance notice of that question. Jenny Moore, do you have a point to make, Jenny?
Thank you very much. Yes, I'm aware of what the university is doing, which is absolutely excellent. And I think the question posed by the person that you've just read out, I like the way it came down to the individual level, so that it means that every person who is here as a student or staff member and who graduates takes on their own little challenge. And I think that's something that could be added quite nicely to all the good things the university is doing.
Thanks very much, Jenny. Are there any other contributions on this topic, or any other topics that people in the hall want to raise? Norman.
It concerns me that although I understand we have the 4th largest set of museum exhibits, nobody gets to see them. I think there is a plan for some sort of electronic display. I don't think this is an alternative. It is a cheap substitute. I think it is unworthy of this university. We have a town council of vandals here. There's even less excuse for a university being the same. Let's see all these fine exhibits.
Many thanks, Norman. I heartily agree with you as a lover of museums, and that the ability to display the Marshall College Museum exhibits was part of the angle that the report that we submitted in the context of the Marshall redevelopment. There's a real opportunity there to do better displays. In the absence of a large display space, there is in the new library, the architecture of which Norman and I were discussing before the meeting. There is in the new library a display space which I think the special collections staff of the university have made marvelous use of, showing, for example, the Audubon bird illustrations and the amazing sarcophagus of the Egyptian mummy, to name but two. But I think your point has been well heard by George. And again, we'll keep an eye on that in the business committee, because I suspect that we're just as passionate about it as you are, Norman. Any other? Oh, sorry, Tracy.
Thank you, and thank you for the question, Norman. Very much share your desire that we understand and develop and share the collections of the university. I think I do need to be frank that there is a significant amount of curation work that needs to be done on all of the collections. I'm currently investing in that within the professional services to start that work, but it isn't as simple as simply allowing access. There is a lot of work to do to understand the elements that are held within the collection and those that should continue to be held and obviously to be protected and maintained going forward. So there is work in hand, but it is a big job to do.
Thanks very much, Tracy. I also wonder whether we might reflect, Norman, on whether as a future agenda item for a general council meeting, or perhaps a business committee meeting. We might invite Neil Curtis from the curator of the special collections along, perhaps with a subset of portable and already well curated items that can be some small genuflection in the direction that you suggest, and which we all agree with. Thanks very much. Are there any online contributions, Nicole?
There's not any questions, but there is a couple of comments. Our rector just wanted to say that the King's Quarter project is brilliant and adds very positively to the university. And Mark has come back saying that he's very much in agreement with what Norman has said, and also said the displays are highly significant and should be publicly available, but the university also deserves praise for the work it has done on some of the repatriation of artefacts such as the Benin bronze, rightly a historical wrong.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other business items from the floor? Right. Now, I think then that we are on to item 8, notice of the next statutory meeting. After the interruption of the pandemic, we have it in mind to return to the old rhythm of having a meeting at about this time of year and having another meeting about December. What we're trying to do is to identify topics which are of particular interest, of course, to members of the General Council, but which are also tangible to encourage in-person participation and intangible enough to allow online participation. And I've alluded to one or two ideas, including the one that Norman has just suggested as we've gone along. Other ideas for topics for General Council meetings would be very welcome, and Nicole has put in the chat the right email address to get in touch with. But in closing the meeting, in closing this meeting, can I particularly thank George and Tracy and Claire for their presentations, particularly, if I may, Claire, for that marvelous illustrations, and we wish you both well in the progress of the project. You can also avoid adding to the lists of building projects in Scotland which have fallen behind time. I've noted down the forecast dates, and we'll put in the agenda, I'm sure at the time, a tour of the finalised King's Quarter project. So thank you very much to those of you who've attended, particularly those in person, and also those online or who come to the recording afterwards. Thank you very much indeed.
And just to say, as a reminder, there will be the tours outside. If you're wanting to go on that, you can just meet at the main entrance. You can meet Claire there, and there is more teas and coffees, so please do help yourself.